Hello, I am so excited to share with you this episode of Walking Spiritually. I spoke with Lorna Hines, who is a spiritualist doing amazing work across lines for trauma, for teaching us history of our own spiritualist tradition, and most especially for allowing a communication across the race barrier and across the color lines so that those of us that are working can understand each other, no matter what our color, what our background, what our trauma. And she has some amazing ideas and amazing insight. And I'm just so excited to be able to bring you a conversation in which we do talk about equality in the work that we do and in our own spiritual lives, and especially in spiritualism. So enjoy the conversation, and I'm just gonna put this out there now, and we talk about it at the very, very end of the conversation, but don't be afraid to expand your awareness and educate yourselves in any way possible so that we learn more about each other and where we're coming from, and aren't afraid to say, you know what, I don't always get it, and I'm here to understand, and you know what, please fill me in on what's going on with you. So, and again, so excited to share this with you. Enjoy, expand, learn, keep walking. Hi, Lorna.
Hello, Jen. How are you today?
This is beautiful. I'm so glad you agreed to speak with me. Before we do anything else, I'm going to ask you to tell everybody that's watching who you are.
That would take, I think, most of the interview, so I'll try to make it as short as possible.
Okay.
I am a woman of many things, many interests, multiple careers, multiple relationships, but for, I think, the interests of your audience, I am a trance medium, as you know, intuitive. I am especially interested in trance healing, and of course, mediumship, regular mental mediumship. And I teach, I write, I have a family, and I have had an interest and dedication in mental health and addictions for most of my 40-odd career, doing everything from being an administrator, working for key cabinet positions in state government, being in charge of 3 divisions of mental health and psychiatry in acute care hospitals in New York City. Wrote grants. I taught also for about 15 years in graduate schools of social work. And my interest in that aspect of my career focused on trauma, focused on issues of inclusion, diversity, cultural competence, and I presented scientific presentations on those issues. But like many of us, I grew up in a very spiritual household, so I was very comfortable in spirituality and also religion. And I began to feel, with all the things that I was doing, that there was something missing, that there was something else that I needed to do. And I got some great help from my spirit helpers, and was guided into training for mediumship and trance and so forth.
How do you think your spiritual upbringing, or even your own personal experiences, how do you fold your career and your mediumship? Do you find a connection in there for you?
Well, I think there are multiple connections, and I thought about the fact that you might ask this question, and I feel as though maybe when I was about 9 or so, maybe even 10, there was a pivotal time where I was reviewing a pictorial essay about women that were being held in New York City in what was called the infamous tombs, a horrific structure that has since been terminated. But the conditions were horrific. My father gave me this pictorial essay. He is in spirit, God rest his soul. But oftentimes he would do taxes for people. And when he got finished, they wouldn't pay him, but they would give him books and different things. And so he gave that to me. And I will tell you, I can even remember as I speak to you, just going over those pages and pages over and over and seeing these women that were in these conditions. And I think that in many ways, reviewing that exerted a sense of trauma for me. And if you look at the continuum of trauma, you know that it was definitely on the lower end, but nonetheless, it imprinted something in my mind, body, and spirit. And I knew then that I would be helping people with unseen hurts. And this has been, I feel, one of the major thematic elements in my career spiritual trajectory. Because even in my mediumship, this type of thing comes up in my mediumship readings. I'm often used more in the emotional end by spirit than some of the other ways of providing readings. And you see, with the inclusion and the diversity piece, that being very important to me, had to do also, I think, with this same thematic element, this idea of fairness and fair treatment and not putting people in horrific conditions. And that, I think, I thought I was going to leave the inclusion and the trauma and all of that kind of thing going into my spiritual practice. But you see, the intelligence of the spirit and of spirit prevails. And so the guidance now is, are there issues of inclusion, diversity, mental health issues? And by the way, I am also a practicing psychotherapist, and I've continued that practice as well. I thought I was going to leave that too, but again, Spirit guided me to continue that. Now, for a practice standpoint, I do tend to separate both.
Okay.
But nonetheless, I am a holistic being, so I'm quite sure that some of my mental health training seeps into my mediumship and also vice versa.
Do you have any, other than the book you read, you know, and recognizing what those women went through, do you have any personal stories of moving through issues of trauma and inclusion that give you a viewpoint on what you're doing with other people?
Well, yes. And that has to do with my upbringing. I am, I often say myself and Cardi B and Rosie Perez, we're just girls from the Bronx. And I was brought up in Bronx, New York, in New York City. In an urban environment, but nonetheless in a house with a large extended family. But I think my early upbringing, and I'm a child of the 60s, so I am very, very influenced by the civil rights movement and the whole movement around Black nationalism and feeling good about yourself and having a positive identity, which is very much akin, you see how these things cycle, to the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think I was very impacted, for example, by the work of Martin Luther King and actually seeing the dogs set upon people that were wanting to just have a soda at a fountain in a Woolworths in the South. I was very, very impacted in what you would call middle school, I guess, but it was junior high for me, with the 4 little girls that were mercilessly killed in the bombing in Alabama. So I would say that there was some major uh, impact issues, I think, that exerted themselves in my mind, body, and spirit. And do keep in mind, the media had tremendous influence. There were many times, unlike presently, that you saw a person of color on TV. You never did. And if you did, I think the first time I saw a person might have been Nat King Cole or something like that. But when you did see a person that looked like you on TV, it was so remarkable that you would call up everybody you knew that were people of color to let them know, so they could see it, because it was so unbelievable, because there were absolutely no people of color like myself. And so very much I was the Ozzie and Harriet generation, the Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best. And those family constellations were very much unlike my own family constellation. And so in some respects, I think I must have felt stigmatized, or I felt uniquely different, juxtaposed to what I saw and what I was living. And last, in graduate school, you won't believe this, I went to Ivy League graduate school, and there was not one course or really mention of issues of equality and diversity, and how to work in the dynamics of difference between you and your client. It was not really discussed. I remember one of the first times I heard it, and it was just so wonderful, when I was pursuing my own therapy. And the woman I spoke to, kind of interviewing as a possible therapist, she said to me, "Lorna, I'm a brown person. Uh, what is your color? And what would be your preference in working with a therapist?" So you see, there were lots of missing parts in my upbringing that I think exerted a profound influence on my body, mind, and spirit.
So what things did you do for yourself then to bring yourself back to some kind of equilibrium?
Well, my my strong sense of the injustice of it all propelled me to begin searching on my own. So first of all, I'm an eternal student, and I love studies. I love the classroom or the workshop atmosphere. So doing research and uh, initiating a journey of on my own is not foreign. So even though some of these things were not present in my own education and background, I would introduce it. I would make it something that I studied and I reviewed on my own, and let the professor or whomever was in charge, let them deal with it. Oftentimes, as you can imagine, they knew very little about what I was talking about, and oftentimes I would get poor marks because of that. But nonetheless, I always push the envelope. And it's the same thing in my own career. Uh, I really felt strongly that issues of trauma and issues of cultural competence was sorely lacking in the mental health system, and continues to this day, I might add.
I'm going to ask
Even
you
though,
you said cultural competence.
yes,
What's your
yes.
definition for that?
Cultural competence has to do with the knowledge, skills, behaviors, the thought process, the reflections, how we begin to see people in a cultural context. There is always an opportunity to use these skills, even though we may feel that the person is the same as us, because there are so many aspects when we talk about culture. When we talk about culture, we're talking about ethnicity, nationality, ableism, the different isms that you and I have talked about quite extensively. So it encompasses all of those things, and it pushes people not only in the mental health, but to me, this is a universal skills that all people that are part of a human family should have. But it pushes us to remove that invisible lens that exists in our mind, body, and spirit, our thoughts, where we begin to see people not as they are, but who we think they are. It forces us to do that through self-reflection, through self-knowledge, do education and training and data, all of those things.
So what are some ways that you found, or maybe it's your wish list, that we can bring those kind of things into the present? Because from my perspective, it's a lot of like what you're saying, there's this inability to either listen or to see or to recognize, just each other on a personal level, let alone a grander ism level. So I mean, from where you're sitting and your experience, how would you bring that into the present? What's some things that you would do or you have done already?
Well, I think it's a multi-dimensional process. And I seek, and I'll be very clear about this, that I do want to, in many ways, overturn the way spiritual practitioners are taught, what they are told to value, and their vision and how they see themselves. I think we have the tendency in our arena to focus on the techniques, to focus on building the skill around the specific spiritual uh, uh, undertaking without fostering a sense of understanding that that technique or that skill that the person is working on has a connection to who they are and how they will deliver and share that skill. So I'm talking about fundamental change in personal transformation of spiritual practitioners all over the world, because I think that this is a world issue, not only relevant here in the United States, where we have lots and lots of problems, lots of demonstration of inequality and lack of diversity, but there are similar problems that are not as widely discussed in Europe and Asia and so on and so forth. Colorism is another very important issue where people have a tendency, again, as a cross-cultural, cross-national issue around lighter skin. And how does that impact us? How does that unconsciously, subconsciously, how does that impact the way we see the world? All of these things are so important, you can't imagine. So for my own self, with our spiritual practice, I'm beginning to focus very much on the history of spiritualism, because for whatever reason, now here's the thing, among spiritualists, we value and we talk quite a bit about our history of uh, social injustice and focusing on so many different historical aspects of ways in which we wanted to stop injustice. And we also talk about the welcoming that we have, the welcoming atmosphere to everyone. And I think some of those aspects are very true, but some of them are outright falsehoods. Number one, we don't have an adequate history of the extent to which people of color have historically been involved in spiritual practice and spiritualism. We don't have a true history. And I talk about this over and over, and I hope people are hearing me, because there's a reason in the 1840s and 1850s that when Andrew Jackson Davis, who I respect very much, when he was on platform with a wonderful trance medium by the name of Harriet Wilson, that he was talked about and he has been discussed, but she is missing from our history. So our mediums who are familiar with the Fox sisters and all of that piece, Maria Hayden, all of the forerunners of modern spiritualism, they should be equally cognizant and aware of Mother Leafy Anderson, a wonderful, wonderful, developed after uh, the Black spiritualists were evicted from the spiritualist community around 1922
I
and went
just
to
learned of
form.
that.
Yeah.
I just now learned of that, like just a few days ago. It was crazy.
Well,
Crazy.
I hope you'll continue your involvement with our Facebook group, Mediums of African Ancestry. I'm the administrator, and we are talking about this. We are giving workshops and lectures so that the untold history of people of color in spiritualism are going to, it has to be absorbed and understood. And I don't want to leave out Latinx people, because we're going to shortly host in the celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, we're going to talk about the extent to which Latinx people are also involved in spiritualism. So my goal is for the average medium who might be white, who is studying maybe in your beginner's class, or some of my wonderful colleagues that are hosting trainings, that they will begin to understand and have a more cohesive, inclusive understanding of the extent to which people of color are very much involved in spiritualist and mediumistic and spiritual practices, so that when they're practicing their mediumship, and perhaps they're coming to offer me a reading, and for some reason a white person comes through, and they immediately think, given their mind and perhaps ego, edging God out kind of ego, that uh, this spirit person could not possibly be for Lorna. You see? It couldn't possibly. And by the way, this has happened to me. But hopefully, with their training and their understanding and their or shall I say, modifying or decluttering their false understanding of the experience of African Americans in this country, they will begin to understand how it's possible that I might have a relative that's white, and you, Jen, if you're having a reading, that is quite possible. And I'm not talking about reincarnation and past lives and stuff like that. I'm talking the actual physical existence of people of color. And here's the good thing too, for your mediums that perhaps are in your classes and also happen to be white. I believe as they begin to have this personal transformation, as they begin to widen and expand their understanding of the world and removing that false lens that they have, they will find that their practices expand exponentially. Because I do feel, and I'd be guided to feel and think this way, those in spirit will have more trust for these mediums. They will have more of a feeling that this person can deliver what it is I want to communicate to my loved one in a fair and equitable and, of course, valid and truthful way.
So I love what you're saying about the personal aspect and of our own development and being willing to even take that on. I think that's the first step. You have to be willing to take it on. What do you see though structurally? Like on a structural level, are there things that we can do as a whole spiritual community to make sure that there is, other than the history, because I know the history is important, but how do I bring that, or how do you see that coming into the now? Do you see any structural things in the now that really need looked at to take some of those on?
Number one, I think structurally there needs to be change in terms of how training is organized and how we communicate to students who are studying spiritual practices what is important, what is valid, what are the things that they should strive for. Technique is important. And as you know, I have worked for quite a long time with the SNU and the SNUI. And believe me, they are quite rigorous. I'll show you the scars on my back uh, with the requirements. And they did not in any way hold back in their expectations of me. And this is continuing to the present day. But I would love to have buy-in from the Arthur Findlay College. I would love to have buy-in on some of these issues with the Barbanel Center. I would love to have buy-in with tutors that are at AFC, so that they begin to buy into that these concepts that I'm talking about, the skills, the abilities, the competencies that mediums must have in order to practice effectively in a multicultural environment. Now, let's take an example.
Mhm.
If you or other white people that are leaders in our field are hosting workshops or hosting training facilities, and over and over and over, we don't see the presence of people of color in your programs. What makes that something that doesn't disturb that medium or doesn't uh, foster a sense of curiosity as to what makes this current number of participants all the same color, all the same racial group, all the same ethnicity, all the same class? Well, isn't there something like a itch or a nagging sensation of questioning? So you see, the structure. Now, I wouldn't dare to say that we should establish quotas, because that will get me in a lot of trouble, I think, with the number of people. But I do think that in answer to your question in terms of structure, I think we have to in some way imbue and impact our leadership, whether it's Arthur Findlay or whomever, Morris Pratt. Uh, uh, Recently, myself and two colleagues were invited to deliver a workshop on the isms that impact our spiritual practices. This type of invitation makes me very, very hopeful that perhaps we're taking baby steps towards structural changes, towards impacting the way we train, the way we understand, and how we live our lives as people by and for and with spirit. Because, you know, we're told, even it was a White Eagle or Silver Birch, I forget which, talked about the fact that in the heavenly realm, we have a wonderful cornucopia of ethnic, racial, class diversity. So something has occurred that in spirit, these issues have been figured out. And in the same quote that I'm thinking about, the power differential between those that were wealthy on the physical realm and those that were poor on the physical realm, they're all on equal footing. I'm getting chills as I say this, because I know it's true. So how do we replicate that? How do we begin to address the fact that this is something that has happened in spirit and we can't figure it out here on the earth plane? Let me challenge your listeners to join me and let us figure this out.
That might be a great ending point. The challenge. I'm going to ask you if there's anything else that you, and wrap up, because I don't know that I have much else to add, because you made such good points. And the how, though, I think it's necessary to keep these conversations up to find the how. I love what you're doing with the group online, because quite honestly, the clicker for me, in one of the Zoom meetings I bumped in on, was what you said at the beginning, was how many of these lovely people said, oh my goodness, there's people here that look like me. I mean, I think y'all said it. Oh my goodness, there's people here that look like me. So yeah, to make a place, or to recognize that it is welcoming and let everybody feel that way, that's eye-opening for me to know that's even a challenge. Because you're right. I mean, in the spiritualist community, there's this image that, well, everybody can come. Of course, everybody can come. And yet there's a group of people online going, oh my goodness, I feel comfortable here, and I didn't feel comfortable walking into an actual building. So there is definitely something there that we have to recognize somehow. You're right, somehow.
And I know you're going to be ending shortly, but there's two things I want to say. And that is, yes, we're welcoming, but that itch that I'm talking about, to begin to be even more welcoming in recruiting and perhaps advertising and talking to groups who are part of the people of color potential participants rather. We're not you see, and often what I hear is, oh, they don't want to come because, we maybe don't have the music they like, or they're more comfortable in their own churches, or they think that we're worshiping devils and this and that. But you see, I think that's a cop-out. And I really do, and I'm going to say it. It's a cop-out and a refusal to begin to see the opportunities for change, and for us replicating what Spirit wants us to do that is already being done in the spirit realm. And so I say to your participants, or those that are listening to this, is we have to stretch ourselves, and we have to engage communities of color so that they are included, so that we are living the brotherhood of people as we are taught to do in the second principle. Not just the people that show up, but maybe if I come to your center, or perhaps one of the leaders can say to me, Lorna, do you know other people of color that might come, and how might we engage them? And maybe we can devote one service to a diversity day, where we encourage and invite people in the area to come and learn about what it is we're offering, demystify it. That's one thing. The other thing is the socio-political, economic face and identity in this country has to be brought into our understanding of our spiritual work, because our spiritual work is about life and truth, and living our lives in a very truthful and honest and genuine way. And so it's also a cop-out to say, and I've been accused of this, that you're too political, or you're talking about political stuff. And I don't expect that everyone is going to live their lives or understand life and do things that the way I do. I respect that. But at the same time, we have multiple problems. And it's not just about police violence in our country. We have horrible health disparities. I spoke to you, uh, I think, about a recent study about Black children and adolescents that have been denied pain medication while they're in a space of acute appendicitis. This is in Journal of Pediatrics. I have the data to show that. How would you feel if your 10 or 11-year-old of color was not allowed important medication to manage their pain based upon the assessment of the medical professional that they did not need it? This is horrific. We have a problem with infant and maternal deaths due to preeclampsia and other things around Black women right here in New Jersey. And it's not just poor women. Middle-class women are going through these maternal deaths. And by the way, research indicates that for the middle-class women and upper-class Black women who are experiencing these maternal deaths and so forth, it has to do with the stress of racism. This is then telling me that racism is dangerous to your health. And I have a personal experience of this because with two of my children, I suffered the preeclampsia. And it's nothing to close your eyes at. Our mass incarceration numbers are horrible. The employment gap is horrific. We know that in various communities across the United States, various very formalized racial disparate issues and laws are used. You know, I hope you know, in the Michael Brown situation in Ferguson, Missouri, that it was already legislated there that police are forced to find ways to arrest and give tickets to the Black people in that community for very nominal and not that important types of breaking the law. And the money that was received from those tickets and those arrests were placed in the coffers of that city, and they utilized that money to be able to manage their various things that needed to go in that city. So you see, they have found a way to make inclusion, lack of inclusion, lack of diversity, racial hatred, to make money off of it. So you see, all of these things that I'm talking about that are aspects of our existence here in the United States need to be understood by our burgeoning mediums and spiritual practitioners. So perhaps if they are enriched and empowered with the facts, that the invisible lens that they possess, they will have to remove it. They will have to dispel it because the actual facts are in their faces. Facts that for whatever reason they have not understood, not received, whatever the case may be, but they're incontrovertible facts.
I'm going to ask you to say the name of your group again. So anybody that's listening that would like to bump in on those conversations has a possibility.
Absolutely. And I hope with your help, Jen, that we will expand. We are a diverse learning community. If you're interested in learning, if you're interested in expanding your understanding as a spiritual practitioner, I'm looking for mediums, for intuitives, for psychics, for Reiki practitioners, whatever is your possible path. It's a Facebook group. It is called Mediums of African Ancestry. I am the administrator. If you type that in the search part in Facebook, you will see it will come up and you can apply to be admitted. It is a private group, and I'm very clear about that because I very much want to propel and ensure that we have a group that are like-minded individuals, that they're really coming to learn, they're really coming to share, they're really coming to begin to look at their spiritual practice as it relates to people of color. So, mediums of African ancestry. In fact, we're going to have a lovely healing meditation on Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, led by one of our members. So, it's a situation in which we learn, we practice, we do. I'm looking forward to the Latinx Heritage Group presentation that's coming up. And stay tuned for a date on mediums, how to be an anti-racist medium. I'm really looking forward to that. How to be an anti-racist medium. So we begin to pull apart the aspects of that and understanding that. So mediums of African ancestry. And those of you that are in leadership positions in your centers, in your programs where you teach people that are trying to be spiritual practitioners, I have myself and others that are available to come and conduct workshops, conduct training forums where we begin to imbue. We must start with it's not just about technique. It's not about just we're all spiritual and we're all on this spiritual path. Indeed we are, but the spiritual part of a significant missing part of the spiritual path is the extent to which we don't own and we don't grab into the opportunity that exists to expand people that are sitters, that are practitioners, and of course those in spirit that want to come through and make themselves known to their loved ones.
This has been fantastic, Lorna. Thank you so much for everything you shared. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Jen, and please stick with us.
Oh, I will.
Looking forward to your allyship.
Thank you.